Okay. It's the last class before break, except for discussion section tomorrow and whatever other classes you have today and whatever other classes you have tomorrow. But it feels like the last class before break. And once again, I have forgotten to put out the apples, even though they made me late to school, because I realized halfway here that I had forgotten them in my refrigerator. Very important, put the apples out. How are we doing today? Tired? I heard some stuff about a linear algebra exam that maybe wasn't super great. Sorry to hear that. If everyone's failing, it's fine. I'm sorry?
If I can't get a good grade,
I guess that's one perspective. I always feel bad when I'm teaching classes like that and sort of ends up with like the whole class doing really poorly. Like I always feel like that is on me as the teacher, even when it's like the students aren't showing up and they're not doing the homework. Yeah. Hopefully, whoever's teaching that class will come up with a plan over break to get everybody on track. Let's see. Same announcements as Tuesday. So the Monday after we come back in the evening, 5:30 p.m., I'll be screening the documentary How to Survive a Plague, which is really fantastic. It's about the HIV/AIDS movement in New York City in the 80s and 90s. A lot of interesting stuff about expertise, different sources of expertise, and public challenges to expertise. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I hope at least some of the folks in the class come hang out, watch this movie with us. Other reminder, the Friday after break is this panel discussion and forum that the philosophy department is organizing. Does the future need us? The ethics of AI in education. Panelists are Professor Gunn from philosophy, Professor Yoshimi from cognitive science and philosophy, and Professor Bongers from applied math and data science and computing. They are going to be talking about their very different takes on AI in education, from a fairly optimistic take to one that's much more pessimistic or skeptical, and an opportunity for anyone who shows up to make their own contribution to the discussion during the forum section. We have one RSVP from a local reporter, which is very cool. I'm hoping we get a couple more RSVPs, and we get a little bit of news coverage for this as well, because we don't get, like, we do a lot of cool stuff on campus that doesn't get a lot of broader public attention. But yeah, so those are the two events coming up after break. So last time, and Sahana, you had an event announcement also after break. Remember to send me that, and I can put that in the slides. Okay. Last time on Tuesday, we started looking at the last part of this unit on argument by example, or induction, or generalization. And this is looking at the data generating process that leads up to the key statistic. Remember, the key statistic is premise 4. It's the one that says in the sample, say, only 1.07 per 1,000 people who were given the MMR vaccine developed autism. That is the key statistic, the claim about the sample that we make in the premises. And when we assess that key statistic, what I'm offering you is a simplified but still generally applicable way of thinking about the data generating process, the way in which the data behind that statistic were generated and analyzed. this has 4 steps: the target specification, data generation, data collection, data interpretation. What we're going to do in a minute, so we went through these 4 steps for the Danish MMR study last time. What I'm going to have you spend the first 10 minutes or so doing is looking back at your notes, looking back at the slides from last time, writing in your group, writing or coming up with sort of 1-sentence statements for each of these 4 steps, and then an overall summary assessment of the data generating process. So a way to refresh yourselves on where we left off last time. Before we go back and refresh ourselves and write these summaries, are there any questions about these 4 steps at an abstract level? Okay, any questions about what I want you to do? Okay, very good. Do you want to control your own screens so that like you can jump back through the previous slides at your own pace, maybe set up some shared notes, or do you want just the slides up? Just the slides? Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing it's going to be 10 minutes, especially as like people trickle in and you need to explain what's going on. So I have about 6 after, so probably around 15 or 16 after we'll come back together. Okay, I get the impression that most tables are struggling with, I don't know, like just tiredness or something today. Is there like an exam yesterday or today? And that's sort of what it was? Okay. Yours is later today.
I also have one later today.
Okay. Tomorrow morning? Okay. So it's just you've been focusing, you've been working hard on like studying for these exams and stuff, and you're just tired this morning? Okay. I mean, you can say that kind of thing when I ask how everyone is doing. Okay, so let's do this together. So we have these 4 steps: target specification, data generation, data collection, data interpretation. What's going on in the first step? Just like one sentence, a couple of words. I'll even do this. Why is my phone ringing? It is too early in the morning for my phone to ring. Why is my mom calling me? She knows I'm teaching right now. Okay. Target specification, step number 1. What's going on here? We think about the Danish MMR study. We don't even have to do this abstractly. What did the researchers behind the Danish MMR study do in the target specification step?
If I recall correctly,
Uh-huh.
I very well may not. I'm pretty sure what they were trying to determine
Mm-hmm.
was how many children get autism. Sorry, phrasing. They were trying to see if there was a corollary effect between developing autism and receiving the MMR vaccine. And to that end,
Mm-hmm.
they looked for people who had both received the MMR vaccine and developed autism.
Good. So in response to a question from Devin last time, not you, Devin, the other Devin who's not here right now, sort of the overall interest is there a causal relationship between getting the MMR vaccine and developing autism, or at least being diagnosed with autism? Causation is tricky. Like I said, I could do a whole class, maybe even 2 semesters, on how we investigate causal relationships. It's simpler to look at correlations, sort of patterns of association between getting the MMR vaccine and developing or being diagnosed with autism. So the research question here was this correlation question. How many kids who receive the MMR vaccine develop autism? From here, as part of target specification, they're specifying the population they're interested in. That's the people who received the MMR vaccine, and what we call the target property, or in the textbook, I call it the target predicate, because I haven't updated that yet. This is the target population are the people we're interested in making a generalization about. So this is the subject, the grammatical subject of the conclusion. And then the target property is the claim we're making about them. So this is the grammatical predicate in the conclusion. Does this sound familiar? Okay. Now we have critical questions that so the researchers get to say, this is the question we're interested in, this is the population we're making the generalization about, this is the property we are asking, like how it's distributed among them. The researchers get to decide what population they're interested in, what questions they're interested in. That's up to the researchers to decide. But we can ask, well, is this appropriate? Is the property clearly specified, or is it maybe ambiguous or vague? Something like autism we talked about last time is kind of complex. It's not straightforward to measure. Autism, the definition has changed over time as psychiatrists have learned more about the condition, and you can't do something like a blood test to say whether or not someone is on the autism spectrum. So there are ways in which this target property is kind of ambiguous or vague. There are challenges to measuring it. And we want to consider, okay, taking these challenges into account. Sorry, I have to sneeze. Or maybe not. So taking these kinds of challenges with autism into account, the way the community of psychiatrists sort of agrees on these like complex sets of criteria. They can change over time as psychiatrists develop a better understanding. Sahana last time raised concerns about the possibility of masking, where someone who's on the spectrum presents as neurotypical. Thinking about these kinds of issues, we want to end up trying to summarize these in terms of the risk of undercounting or overcounting. You think of this as underestimating or overestimating. We're trying to estimate how many people in the sample are autistic. Well, these challenges tend to lead us to underestimate the number of autistic people or overestimate the number of autistic people overall. What do you think? We're struggling to wake up, so think about that question for a second. The challenges we've identified with characterizing and measuring autism, will these tend to lead to undercounting or overcounting? Is the question clear enough? Okay, take a minute. Come up with your answer to that question, and then check in with your table once you have your answer. It might help, since people are really tired today, write out your answer, just in a text file or a Google Doc or whatever. Write out your answer real quick, so that you're not entirely relying on like your own tired cognitive processes here. You're externalizing your thinking a little bit. Write down your answer to that question. These issues we've identified, do they tend to lead to undercounting autism or overcounting autism in the sample? Write that down. I'll give you 30 seconds of quiet and then encourage you to check in with your groups. Is this like a procedural question? Okay.
So to scope the question a little bit,
Uh-huh.
we've been just now discussing kind of the issues that come along with diagnosing autism.
Mm-hmm.
Should we only focus on those, or should we also think about?
Think about all the issues we talked about last time.
Oh, so that includes stuff
Yeah.
that might just be they couldn't get this data, even
Yeah.
though the data could be collected.
Yeah. So go ahead and include the other issues we talked about last time, because we don't have time to kind of go through all of these step by step the way we did before. Okay, over the next 10 seconds or so, if you could finish up writing out your answer and then check in with your table. come back together in 30 seconds. Okay, coming back together, I quickly did sort of my, like a high-level 2-sentence summary of the issues we identified last time. Autism is a complex condition that's difficult to define and measure. It's difficult in both ways. In addition, we talked a little bit about how working with medical records requires carefully respecting patient privacy. That wasn't a major factor last time, but that was an issue that was brought up. And I think I talk about it in the online textbook, which goes into all of this in much, much more detail than we're going to have time to do. So then, overall conclusion, I wanted to highlight it seems plausible that. I'm guessing almost all of us in the room don't have any particular expertise in autism. I've read the Wikipedia page on diagnosing autism. That is like the extent of my knowledge. It's better than nothing, but I'm still going off of primarily what seems plausible to me rather than having real expertise in the complexities of diagnosing and measuring autism and whether they contribute to overcounting or undercounting. Okay. Questions about this proviso or this qualification? It seems plausible that? Okay, so overcounting or undercounting, what did you say? Duncan?
So we suspected a net undercounting, but in particular that this undercounting would arise from data loss and things that make issues in communicating the data collected,
Okay.
not in biases that come from data collection themselves. Because as it was brought up that there is ambiguity in what constitutes autism that may lead to it being misdiagnosed, but that misdiagnosis could just as easily be misdiagnosing somebody who doesn't have autism such that they now are diagnosed with it, and conversely, misdiagnosing somebody who does have autism now such that they do not have a diagnosis for it. And so I would personally expect no net bias from the diagnosis step.
Okay, just for the sake of time. So for the first set of concerns about the complexity of defining and measuring autism, it seems plausible to you and Elizabeth that overall, probably like it's going to lead to overcounting sometimes, undercounting other times, and like sort of those will wash out in the end. Whereas sort of accuracy of data records over time, especially in the 90s, if they're kept primarily on paper, this could lead to undercounting autism. So that would mean that records of autistic patients are more likely to be lost. Is that the idea?
No, just in total.
Okay.
If we have some net amount of cases documented out of a population.
Okay.
Just say we've collected 10,000 cases of people who have autism.
Okay.
If we lose those cases, we're going to now say that we have some number below 10,000.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I think the idea here is there won't be psychiatric records of, so most patients who don't have autism won't have psychiatric records, like at all. at least ones that are relevant to autism.
Yeah.
So those records can't be lost, whereas if someone is diagnosed, there's a risk that their records will be lost. And so this can lead to undercounting. Is that the idea?
Just the baseline assumption is somebody doesn't have the condition.
Okay.
So when we lose documentation that somebody does, we revert to the baseline assumption that they do.
Okay, good. I'm going to come back to sort of the level of thoughtfulness here, which is good, and sort of expectations for actually showing up on the assignments. I wanted to hear from other folks, though. What did you say overall, overcounting or undercounting? Freddie.
I said overcounting because
Okay.
when the year of the actual study, I feel like, I
Mm-hmm.
think I remember is that we used to lump like a lot of conditions into autism.
Hmm.
They were like nowadays we agree they're their own separate thing.
Ah, okay. So overcounting because the definition at the time was too expansive. It included things that today we wouldn't include as autism. Okay, maybe one more answer. Maybe somebody at table 9 or table 3. What did you say, overcounting or undercounting? Okay. Well, we can do this with the answers that we have because one table's overall answer was these factors will tend to lead to undercounting. Other table's answer was these factors will tend to lead to overcounting. So disagreement in our overall assessments of whether these are likely to lead to overcounting or undercounting. That disagreement is okay. I'm going to come back to this point in just a second after I introduce the argument analysis assignment. But when Polyphony and I go to give grades on these assignments, we're not looking for any particular right answer, in part because you are the one who is going to be finding these arguments to analyze. We will not know about them in advance, much less have a particular right answer for how to analyze them already in mind. Okay? Instead, grading these are going to be based on thoughtfulness, putting a reasonable amount of effort into thinking through these kinds of issues, and using tools from the course. So, for example, when we ask you to assess premise 4 of the argument, that is the key statistic, are you writing down a couple of sentences that indicate you've thought through how each of these 4 steps works? And are you giving a thoughtful, justified overall assessment that could look like, because most people aren't screened for autism, and if you are screened, there's a chance your medical records will be lost. This could lead to undercounting. That would be a very good justification for one overall assessment. Or you could say, because the definition of autism has changed, has narrowed over time, this could lead to undercounting in this particular study. No, you said over. It's less about, are you getting the particular right answer, and more about, are you being thoughtful? Are you using the tools and frameworks that we're developing in this class? Are there any questions on that particular point? Okay, so the argument analysis assignment. So after, I guess technically tomorrow, we will have finished this unit. The primary assessment for this unit is an argument analysis of an argument by example. Detailed instructions and link to the assignment are right here. But the basic idea is building on things that you've already done, just doing it specifically for an argument by example. So like in the finding arguments assignment, find, or in this case you can write, if you're having trouble finding one, an argument by example, give a prose version or a summary if it's kind of long, put it in premise conclusion form using our template for statistical induction. And last time we talked about why we use that more complex template rather than just pulling out individual sentences. Then the real meat of the assignment is evaluating each individual premise. Every single premise in the premise conclusion form, you have to say something about. Although for 2 of them, it's just up to the author of the argument. But we'll be looking for you to say that. For the others, for premise 3, we'll be looking at, are you thinking through plausible relevant variation? Are you using the 4 questions to assess plausible relevant variation? And for premise 4, the key statistic, are you thinking through each of these 4 steps of the data generating process and giving a reasonable, thoughtful, plausible overall assessment? You can use those to give an objection. We talked a little bit about this last Thursday, and I believe on Friday in discussion as well. If a sample isn't representative, you have a Rule 2 violation, you can present that as an objection in an argument map. I go back and forth on whether I want you to give an overall assessment. And you all aren't awake, so I'm not sure if you're in a great position to give me your thoughts. Is it valuable for you to say at the end something like, I find this argument credible, or I don't think this argument works at all, or I think there's something to this argument, but it has these weaknesses? I see some thumbs up, some nods, otherwise, but also some looks of very deep confusion. Always confused. Ruby is very confused. That's okay. Not to call out anybody from being confused. Okay. I'll think about this one a little bit more. For now, the other stuff I want to say. Some logistics for doing this assignment. So again, you are going out and finding the argument or writing one from scratch if you have a lot of trouble finding one. That is okay here. You can write a hypothetical or imaginary argument by example if you want. Because you are the one finding it, we don't have a particular right answer in mind. We are looking at, are you being thoughtful? Are you using the tools from the course to analyze that argument? I want you to approach this analysis something more like a paper than like a quiz or an exam. Specifically, there's going to be a bunch of writing you have to do here. That should be clean, readable. We're looking for like complete sentences, use of punctuation, capitalization, things like that. The primary work on this should be done individually, but it's okay to get feedback from peers and others. The Writing Center won't be super helpful for this, but in your study groups, you can share drafts. Get feedback, get help, get clarification from the other members of the class who are also working on their analyses. Target deadline for this is Friday, April 4th. That is the Friday after break. So this may be something you want to start working on a bit over break. In particular, trying to find an argument over break when you have a little more time and can like spend some time looking through news sites or social media sites. And then there are a lot of resources for this in the online textbook. I have a whole page of resources here. Quick references for like the key ideas, the key tools, some suggestions for particular exercises you can do in your study groups to work on these things. And then I think I ended up with 16 example arguments that you can practice analyzing. 3 of them I have worked out myself all the key steps here, putting it in premise conclusion form, assessing each of the premises, turning a concern into an objection, and then putting it in an argument map. So you've got a lot of sample arguments you can work with. And then 4 additional practice arguments you can go with. Okay, we're going to come back to this one in a second. Are there questions about the logistics for this assignment? Okay. So on the topic of overall assessments, I wanted us to do some thinking of what an overall assessment might look like. And we'll see how well this goes with you all being so tired today. We want to start by recognizing that no argument is perfect. Every argument that a human being has given why we should do something or believe something, except for math. Math is a very weird discipline in certain respects. Outside of math, no argument is perfect. Every argument has sort of weaknesses, flaws, limitations that we can identify. Often people without even a lot of expertise, but with the kind of things you're learning in this class, can identify weaknesses in an argument. Support usually comes in degrees. Again, except for math, which is weird, real-world arguments don't claim to provide absolutely guaranteed support for the conclusion. Instead, it's more like, here is some evidence and some reasons why you should accept this claim, and they can be stronger or they can be weaker. However, some arguments are better than others. We have arguments that provide pretty compelling or pretty strong support for their conclusion, and other arguments that provide very little support, if any. So it's still worth thinking about, even though no argument is perfect, arguments outside of math don't provide absolute guarantees, we can still have a range of arguments, a range of support from pretty compelling, pretty strong, if not absolutely guaranteed, to not really doing anything worthwhile at all. So, 3 questions that I'd like you to talk about in groups, and we're going to do like check-ins and more discussions, so working through these 3 questions. This idea about being thoughtful about arguments and recognizing that support comes in degrees. What does this mean when it comes to an objection or a reply? Because an objection is also an argument. A reply is also an argument. Second question, how can we express doubt or confidence in an argument beyond just saying, yes, it's good versus no, it's bad? If support comes in degrees, or the quality of an argument is better or worse rather than yes or no, how do we express that in an assessment of the argument? And then in a few sentences, write an overall assessment of the Danish MMR study argument, because now we've been looking at it for like most of the past 2 weeks. Is at least the first question clear? Okay, so let's take a couple of minutes in your groups, talk about at least the first question, and then we'll check in and then have another small group discussion about the second question and so on. So 2 or 3 minutes on the first point. So if we recognize that support comes in degrees, but some arguments are better than others, how does that impact when we think about an objection to an argument or a critique of an argument? Mm-hmm. Sorry, say that last part again a little louder.
Some are more influential than some.
Some objections are more influential or provide stronger critiques than others. Good. Okay, let's come back together. So if we recognize that objections and replies are arguments, and no argument is perfect, support comes in degrees, but some arguments are better than others, what does this mean when it comes to an objection or a critique of an argument? Devin?
I'm not exactly sure if this is what you're looking for, but I think it kind of means, to me at least, that you should reply or object to the argument and not maybe something unrelated about the argument, and go more for its meaning versus what is explicitly said.
Interesting. That is not what I had in mind. But could you maybe say a little bit more about what you have in mind?
I can try. I don't really know how to phrase it properly, but
Okay.
I think in general, sometimes someone will make an argument,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess you could strawman it through an objection or something, and I think you shouldn't do that. You should focus and thoughtfully analyze that argument instead of just saying, well, you missed this piece of information which is kind of related but not exactly, and so this is wrong because of that.
Okay, so is the idea, going back to some of the stuff we talked about, I want to say it was like week two or three, it was pretty early on. When we're analyzing someone's argument, we don't want to misrepresent it as being weaker than it actually is. That's straw manning, is misrepresenting someone's argument, making it seem like it provides less support than it actually does, or sort of that they had intended, something along those lines. And so yeah, we want to avoid straw manning. We want to avoid misrepresenting the strength of someone's argument by sort of putting words in their mouth that make the argument seem weaker than it was originally. This also came up as part of the paraphrase rules, right? Because one of the rules for paraphrasing is the new version of the argument has to be stronger, at least as strong as the original version. That's why we're justified in taking an argument by example and putting it into the more complicated form of statistical induction, because for the statistical induction to work, it needs those premises about things like the sample being representative, and that often aren't explicit. Does that point make sense?
Yeah.
I was asking the class in general. Does that point make sense, that the opposite of straw manning is called steel manning? We are increasing the support of an argument when we fill in premises that it needs. We're good there? Alexa, are we good there? Okay. So that's not actually what I had in mind, but it is related, because when we point out a criticism of an argument, even of the original version of the argument, so let's say we're not straw manning our interlocutor, we have a nice strong version of their argument, but we point out a criticism of it, we give an objection, that objection is not absolutely guaranteed to undermine the premise it's attacking. The objection is still imperfect because it's another argument. And maybe the objection has problems that our interlocutor will come up with when they give a reply. So we need to be thoughtful about how much support our objections have, are giving in their critique, are giving in their challenge. And the possibility that, okay, so the argument has this weakness, but maybe it could still be reinforced or repaired, or the conclusion could still be like acceptable for completely different grounds. Just because we've given a critique of somebody else's argument doesn't mean the debate is over, we've won, their conclusion should be rejected. Questions or comments on that? Okay, so question number 2 on this slide. If we're thinking in terms of degrees, if we're thinking of supporting and challenging an argument in terms of degrees, but some still better than others, how can we express doubt or confidence in an argument beyond yes or no? And probably those should be reversed. When we say we're confident, we have confidence in an argument, we think it's a good argument, we want something a little more nuanced than just yes, accept this argument. When we have doubts about an argument, we also want something a little more subtle and nuanced than no, don't accept this argument. So the question is, how can we do that? What kinds of phrases or language or what kind of phrasing or language can we use to express confidence or doubt in an argument beyond just yes, I agree, or no, I disagree? Is the question clear? Duncan? Oh, we'll talk in groups first so that even the people who are like 3/4 asleep get some opportunity to think about it, and then we'll come back. So yeah, a few minutes to talk about the second question. Can we express doubt or confidence beyond just saying yes or no? Okay, I think I'm detecting a lull in the conversation. So what are some ways that we can express confidence or doubt in an argument beyond just saying, yes, I agree, you should accept it, or no, I disagree, you shouldn't accept it? Was that a hand, Elizabeth?
But we did come to the conclusion that taking a more, would you say, ambiguous or uncertain approach to
Okay.
Just generally omitting uncertainty seems like a pretty safe way of going at that.
So acknowledging uncertainty, and like what kinds of phrases might you use to do that?
I'm not certain, but I don't know, but maybe this. Just admitting fallibility seems like a fairly safe way to say, I don't know if this is entirely true.
Mhm.
However, this does dispute your argument.
Okay, so phrases like, I'm not certain, but it seems to me like it might be, it's possible that. Was there a hand over here? Maybe Nick, did you have your hand up? You didn't raise your hand. Okay. Somebody over here? No, I'm just hallucinating. Okay. So what are some other ways that we can express confidence or doubt in an argument beyond just saying yes or no? Yeah, Deb.
We were thinking of phrases like, I find this argument compelling because, or I find the support for this argument very good, or I have concerns about this part of the argument.
Oh, good. So phrases like, let's see, I find it compelling, or, sorry, blank for a second. Maybe I'm not fully awake either. I find it compelling. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you just repeat those again?
I have concerns, or the support for this argument is strong, something like that.
Okay, so I have concerns. The support for the argument seems strong, or weak, or moderate, or mixed, or ambiguous. Others? Okay, so final exercise on this slide. Thinking back to everything we have done with the Danish MMR study, including stuff from last week, including what we've said this week, write an overall assessment. A couple of sentences expressing first your personal view. Do you think this study, do you think this argument gives good support for its conclusion? And then, along with that overall assessment, a sentence or two justifying it. And I want you individually to write this out. Give you a few minutes to do that. And then discussing groups. Okay, so we'll start with a couple of minutes for you to write out your overall assessment, and then a few minutes to share at your table. over the next minute or so, see if you can finish up with your individual version and transition to sharing with your group. Back together in about 30 seconds. Okay, let's come back together. So what did you say? What was your overall assessment? That button. What was your overall assessment of this argument we've been looking through over the last couple weeks? Freddie?
It's because I said that, like, despite the flaws
Uh-huh.
in it, like, if we're looking back on it now, because there are some, like, considerations they could have done,
Uh-huh.
and they didn't have, like, rigid, I guess, guidelines for what autism was. What I did say is that there are concerns that it won't generalize well beyond the home country,
Okay.
because the sample is just the children in that country, so we don't know how it could affect children in other countries. I
Mhm.
would say that at least within the home country, we could say with confidence that it does not cause autism, the MMR vaccine, the Danish MMR vaccine.
Okay, so your overall assessment was it has some limitations. The definition of autism has changed over time, so it might be less applicable today. It might be less applicable outside of Denmark, but at least within Denmark, it provides very strong support. Okay, good. I like that. Nice and nuanced. It was also well justified by identifying here are the limitations that I think are important, despite overall thinking it's a strong argument if it's scoped properly. Yeah, that's a very good example. Others? Elizabeth?
It does provide a thought-provoking conclusion to a controversial issue,
Okay.
but I think that it lacks
Okay.
Like, there are definite issues within it that somebody could theoretically nitpick and pick apart until they basically disprove the whole argument to themselves. And I think that the strength of the studies cannot be fully ascertained.
Okay. I'd be interested in the specifics, right? Any argument, so no argument is perfect, right? Any argument has things that someone, maybe they're small nitpicks, that someone could identify with it. So no argument is perfect. But are there specific weaknesses in this argument?
I think what we've discussed as a class, like the issues with data collection and maybe, as they were saying over there, like
Okay.
that it might pertain more to that specific country, and therefore some people might say, well, yeah, that may be true for you, but it's not for us. Stuff like that.
Okay.
Where I don't necessarily think those conclusions are true,
Okay.
but I think that it would be easy for maybe like an equally large publication to be able to convince people that it's not true. You know what I mean?
So is it like, I personally think the argument is maybe moderately strong to pretty strong, but someone might have these specific kinds of concerns because, say, it was just in Denmark. Is that the idea? Okay. We do have to be careful about that kind of position. Like, on the one hand, it's good to be thoughtful, especially when we're thinking about our own arguments. It's good to be thoughtful about, okay, someone who disagrees with me, what could they say to critique my argument, and how do I anticipate those critiques and make my argument as strong as possible? We also have to be careful about avoiding a sort of common rhetorical trope that especially conspiracy theorists like to use, the just asking questions trope, where the idea is, I personally think vaccines are fine, but someone else might say that there are mind control chips in them. And what that trope does, what the conspiracy theorist does with that trope is they sort of present themselves as, no, I don't think this thing, while still communicating, but yeah, you should believe this, or you should take this as a serious possibility, especially for kind of ridiculous things like mind control drugs in the vaccines, or microchips in the vaccines. So we have to be careful about exactly how we present the sort of someone else might say, but that can be a nice way to add some nuance and recognize lots of actual perspectives going on. Good. We're right at time. Duncan, is it quick?
Yeah, my
Okay.
general overview of the whole thing is just, it seems relatively strong because while there are these issues relating to data collection and, as was pointed out, some level of generalization, both of those, at least to me, seem fairly trivial. The total amount of data collection issues compared to the amount of data that was collected is very minor, or else it wouldn't have been published in a scientific journal. And the generalizability of the Danish population to the world population, I think, is quite strong. I don't think they are aliens.
Okay, good. So the two little things I want to highlight in that real quick. So first of all, just saying the sample size is huge. That you were a little bit more subtle than that. But if we just say the sample size is large, remember in this class, not allowed to do that. You will have to, that's an automatic rewrite if you say the sample size is large or the sample size is small. Then the second point I wanted to highlight there is sort of incorporating a reply to a potential objection. So the potential objection that this was only done in Denmark, maybe it doesn't generalize, incorporating a reply that, no, Danes aren't different. It doesn't seem like Danes are different in a relevant way in terms of the vaccine potentially being related to autism. I think that can be a good way to add some nuance as well. Good. Okay. So unfortunately, we did not have time to get to the other big example I had planned for this week, which is an analysis of a piece of political advertising based on a survey of Uber and Lyft drivers. What I'm going to do, it takes about 20 minutes or so if I just do it as a lecture, non-interactively. So I think what I will do is I will record that as like a bonus lecture and also put that up on YouTube so that you can watch that. I don't know if I'll have time to do it today, but I should be able to do it by tomorrow. Possibly, probably, it may or may not be available before discussion section. So it may or may not be discussed in discussion section, but then I will let you all know through an announcement when that is available so that you can watch like that mini lecture and that analysis as well. Because I know a couple people mentioned being interested in that. Okay, any final questions before we go our separate ways for break? At least me and you. You're coming to discussion section tomorrow with Polyphony. Okay, very good. Very good work this week. Very good work so far this semester. I hope you all have a lovely and restful break and you come back refreshed so that we can start talking about expertise and how we identify trustworthy experts in, it's not quite the second half, but the second part of the semester. And that's it for today.